Astrocast. Today is Thursday, August 14th, 2025. We're about 3/4 of a waning gibbous moon. Go home and get out of here. Hope everybody's been well. It's been another week of clouds in Charlotte with no real end in sight, I am sad to say. Thank you for tuning in this week to the Astrocast. As always, I am your host, Rue, and man, what have I been busy with? I guess you could say we have been getting ready for the dark sky trip, which is coming up very shortly. Talked about it a little bit last week. Getting excited now. I'm just a little over a week away, so rolling the dice on this one pretty big, but am meeting up with some friends, so no matter what happens, I'm sure it's going to be a good time. But I sure do hope that we get, one or two nice clear nights. Since I'm going on a dark sky trip in the near future, I also wanted to talk about something that I'd seen posed a few times in various forums that I pay attention to. And that is taking a trip to a dark sky location and then doing target hopping throughout the night. So I wanted to talk about this because, first of all, I have definitely done this before. I have certainly gone to a location and then proceeded to, go to 6 different targets throughout the night because that one sub comes through at a dark sky location and it looks just so nice because it's nice and dark. And you say, wow, I'm getting so much light on this target. I'll do an hour here and then an hour there and switch around. And, what you end up with is 6, good photos. But if you were to maybe stop and just decide to go the full 8 hours of the night on one target, you can end up with significantly better results. And another good reason to talk about this is because it's something that I am going to really try to hold myself to on this next dark sky trip. So being that we're going to be in a very, very darker location, I shouldn't really have a need to use any filters. Typically, if I'm, Bortle 4 or better, I try not to use any sort of filters whatsoever. I want to encourage most people to do that. And I suppose it depends on what you're going for and what you're shooting, obviously, mono versus one-shot color. I am still a one-shot color guy, and I'll probably eventually get into mono, but I just don't really feel like I have a need to right now. And I certainly don't have the best benefits of going into mono, which is another thing worth mentioning. A lot of times when I'm taking a trip to a dark sky location, I might only have 2 or 3 nights. And, if you have 2 or 3 nights to shoot from really good skies, I would, like I say, I would recommend sticking to as few targets as possible, because if you can get, 8 to 12 hours or even more on one target from a truly dark location, you can really get jaw-dropping results compared to a single hour. Now, obviously, there are plenty of projects out there from, remote Bortle 1 skies that, people set up their rigs to be able to remotely log into them, and they'll do 50, 100 hours or more. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about for getting a, like a really nice print that you could do at home and really appreciate. And there's a lot of different targets that you can go for this time of year, obviously, with it getting to be, mid-August, late August is, Orion's pretty much fully up before the sun rises. Now, I wouldn't go for Orion because you're going to be, well into astronomical twilight by the time that he's fully up, and the sun will obviously come soon after. But you do have lots of options within the Milky Way itself. And then you can also, of course, do Milky Way shots. So what I'm personally going to do is I haven't picked the one individual target yet, though I do have a direction that I'm leaning. So the way things are going to fall over those few nights of the new moon, I think I could realistically probably get like 6 to 8 hours on a Milky Way core target, because by the time it gets truly dark out, the Milky Way will be darn near at the meridian, unfortunately. But the advantage of that is that some of the early autumn targets come up really shortly after. And obviously this time of year, the Andromeda galaxy is one that we all start looking at and kind of licking our chops. I've already seen some early returns on Andromeda, and the ASCAR SQA 55 along with the ASI 585 MC Pro tend to pair up pretty well for it. Though I will say, I think the 294 might actually be the better bet for Andromeda. I'm going to have to really play around in Stellarium a little bit over the next week and solidify how I'm going to go here, because obviously I want to make sure that I bring the right camera for the job, but I might be in a situation where I want a little bit more reach with this target and a little bit less reach with that. And unfortunately, I don't have enough room to just bring as much gear as I want, because again, I am flying to this location. So, if all else fails, you can just pick something in Cygnus, right? You really can't go wrong with Cygnus. So the other part that I am going to be trying to get while I'm there is going to be some obviously beautiful Milky Way photography. So there's been a lot of talk of Milky Way photography as of late on our Discord, and I definitely want to get my hands into that. Heck, I want to get my hands into anything astronomy, guys. It's been well over a month since I have seen the stars, like every single day. Clouds and rain, clouds and rain. If anyone's local to the North Carolina area, you definitely know what I'm talking about, because man, oh man, we have had enough of it. And I mentioned the Discord a few moments ago. I want to take a moment, because we've had actually quite a few new members join over the past few weeks, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank them. So a big shout out and a special thank you to Ron, Matt, Vitor. I'm not sure if it's Vitor or Vitor. Forgive me if I botched it. And Jeremy, who just joined last night. He actually joined at 4:24 local time. I woke up this morning, opened up my phone, and saw that we had a new member. And I quickly sent him a message. I'm usually pretty quick about getting people whenever they join, and quickly sending over that link and everything. But he managed to catch me slipping. Now, had it been clear skies, I would have certainly been up for the Perseids last night. But of course, I did not get to see that, unfortunately. I did see quite a few photos from members who were able to witness the Jupiter and Venus conjunction. Man, I wish I could have seen that. It looked so beautiful from the photos that I saw. Shout out to you guys for getting the great shots of the Venus and Jupiter conjunction. Also had another order for an Astrocast shirt this week, and I haven't gotten one for a couple of weeks. I was wondering if everyone forgot about them, but you can still get one of those if you go to qcru.com. You can click on the link that says shop, and it'll take you right there. And I mentioned that because I have a new thing on the website that I've been working on. Just a little bit on the side here and there with a lot of help from AI. But if you want to check it out, I'm working on basically like a simple forecast, if you will, for the night. So you can basically go onto this new site that I've built, and it's going to give you basic facts for the night, cloud cover, what the moon phase is, what the current weather conditions are, if there's wind in the area. And I know you can get that info from a whole lot of different places, but I'm also trying to add in some extra fun stuff for astronomers. So like stuff that I would want to see from the various pages that are out there. And I know there's obviously a lot of good ones. And I don't know if I'll ever compete with them, but I figured what the heck, I might as well give it a try. So it's also got the next ISS pass. And then I've got an area for upcoming astronomical events as well. And it looks like it's mainly showing upcoming meteor showers. So that's kind of handy to have, but I'm going to have to tweak the code a little bit for that. So it's not just showing meteor showers, because that's not all I think of when I think of astronomical events. And most of the astrophotographers out there probably know what I mean. I think it would be really cool to have some code that basically tells you when certain targets become viable during a given time of the year. So like, obviously we know like Andromeda is starting to roll around now. We know that, once October gets here, heck, September, people are going to start putting up photos of Orion that they're getting, right? But there are so many different targets in the night sky. And I think it would be really neat if maybe some of the more obscure ones that become available to you throughout the year are listed here. So that's something that I've got in the works, along with, the 3 best targets for the night on any given night. You've got a 7-day outlook that gives you, again, cloud cover, temperatures, and also the moon phase. And then there's a little fun thing at the bottom. I won't spoil that here, so I won't give it all away. But if you want to check it out, just go to qcru.com and you'll see a button that says space forecast. I will say you got to click the use my location button at the top of the page, because it's got to be able to grab your location. And I haven't found out a way to get the website to just automatically query that info. I think there's a way to do that, but I haven't figured it out yet. But go check out the Space Forecast web app from the Astrocast. Again, you can do that at qcru.com and then just click on Space Forecast and it'll take you right there. Actually had a member, or I'm sorry, not a member, but a fan send in a different website that I wanted to mention to you guys this week. Shout out to Graham for emailing a couple of times. Me and him were chatting back and forth about stuff like light pollution and Starlink satellites. And he definitely has a similar interest to us in that regard. And the actual website for this is, I'm going to put it in the show notes, obviously, but if you happen to be in front of your browser right now and you're listening and you want to check it out, you can go to platform.leolabs.space/visualizations/Leo. And this is a really cool and disturbing website. So what it does is it actually gives you a 3D real-time visualization of everything that is floating around the planet Earth in space. And when you initially pull it up, it's a bit of a shock, but then you zoom in, you're like, maybe that's not so bad. But then you realize that the debris button is unchecked by default. And once you click that, you're like, oh my God, look at all the stuff that's floating around of our planet. And so much of it, I mean, when you actually see all of the paths crisscrossing, and I know that it's a lot of space up there, but when you see how many things are floating through our night sky at any given second, you'll start to think to yourself, it's a miracle that Kepler syndrome hasn't started already. And that's the thing. It may have actually started already and we wouldn't know it, unfortunately. But I do know, I've read, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, but supposedly the geniuses over at Starlink are considering painting their telescopes with a much better darker light absorbing material that won't reflect light as easily. So painting them black, obviously. And, over time, those satellites will get recycled out of the night sky because they're only meant to last for so long before they're put out of commission. And then, another one is brought in to take its place. So there is some hope in that regard that we might be able to, prevent the dumbing down of our night skies. But I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of faith in that. And honestly, with the number of satellites that we're launching every year and what they want to get to just 10 years from now, I mean, we're at like 15,000 and counting right now, I think. If you were to count the pieces of space debris on top of that, it would be countless. But I know that they want to launch something close to like 70,000 more satellites to make up all of these constellations. If you take, all the various billionaires that want to launch stuff into space. And that's, quite a few. And obviously I've also read where there are companies already trying. In fact, I think they already have the technology, but they've been working on getting advertisements into space. And man, that just makes me cringe thinking about it. I avoid advertisements like the plague. I won't have live TV in my house unless it's football season because I hate commercials that much. In fact, if you want to know how much I hate commercials, I actually wrote a script last weekend that will look for the NFL score logo. They actually call it a bug. I found out, a score bug. And that's basically the little image that sits on a football game that shows the score up in the corner. It's pretty much always there. And if you can have your computer check every second to see if it's there and stay on that input, then when it goes away, you can just have it automatically switch to a different VLC video source. And I don't know, watch The Simpsons while the commercials are playing until the football game comes back on. If what I just said sounds like a bunch of German to most of you, I'm sorry. I would imagine to a lot of you, it does not, though. So I found out there is a way to write a script basically to make commercials go away and play whatever video source you want. You do have to be using a computer, obviously, but I have one of those out in my living room that we can watch the game on Sundays. And I really hope I can make that work before football season starts up. One of my few guilty pleasures. I'm a big Carolina Panthers fan. I have been since I was 12 years old. And man, it is not easy to be a Panthers fan unless it's the year 2003 or 2015. And I'm pretty sure it is neither. So yeah, big shout out to you, Graham. Thanks for sending in that info. Like you say, you can see payload, rocket bodies, debris. There's an unknown one that you can check. You can set various filters. You can set time periods. It's really interesting stuff. It's just, again, it's kind of disturbing to see it in action, but it is very, very interesting nonetheless. So if you want to check that out, like I say, I will put the link to the website in the show notes and definitely have a look. So with Milky Way season coming to a close soon, and maybe, a couple more good new moons that you can get out to a dark sky location and really take your time to get a really beautiful shot, I thought it might be a fun time to talk about some tips for shooting the Milky Way. I know that this is something that we've covered on the show before, but it's been many, many episodes since we've talked about Milky Way shots. And I wrote down some ideas as I was working today, and also wrote down a few things that I have specifically had trouble with over the years as I kind of learned the ins and outs of Milky Way photography. It's a completely different beast than deep space photography, obviously, because you're working in much different conditions. Obviously, dark skies are very important when you're doing deep space photography, but dark skies are absolutely crucial when you're doing Milky Way photography. So the first thing that I would say is that you really want to prioritize planning your session around being able to get to dark skies. Even if this means just driving an hour outside of your city to get to somewhere that's 1 to 2 Bortle zones lower than what you have at home, it is absolutely worth taking the time to make that drive. If you're like me and you can get somewhere Bortle 4 or better within, a couple of hours drive time, you should absolutely do that, because having a truly dark location, it just makes such a big difference. You will beat, any rig with the best filters available. A $5,000 camera setup is going to not beat a $500 setup if it's in a really dark sky location, because the Milky Way is just so much more prominent. And I'm a true believer that there are some details that you just can't get using a filter in brighter areas. And the Milky Way is definitely one of those. That's not to say that you can't get any Milky Way shots from, a relatively bright area. It wasn't that long ago that I threw my L Pro on my R5 and went outside with a 16 millimeter lens and took, 30 tracked exposures and was able to get a pretty decent Milky Way shot. But I'm going to say it was decent because, I'm Bortle 7, borderline 8 at this point. And no matter how long I sit out there, I'm never going to get something close to what it's like when I, take a dark sky trip. So there's still time to do it. You haven't run out of time, but definitely start thinking about where you want to go and when. And hopefully the weather will cooperate with you and you can make that happen. Now, when you get there, obviously, depending on how dark of an area you're in, you may use a star tracker or you might just, take regular shots. And that's perfectly fine if you want to take regular shots without a star tracker. I can tell you from a Bortle 2 location, close to a 1, honestly, but on the coast with not the best seeing. So I think it'd probably be closer to a 2. But that said, I got pretty much my favorite Milky Way photo I've ever taken. So absolutely doable without a star tracker. I'm sorry. Favorite Milky Way photo I've ever taken, and I didn't use a star tracker is what I meant to say. Longtime listeners of the show probably know that from my dark sky trip, not this summer, but the past summer, I was able to get some really incredible Milky Way shots. So that said, if you can bring a tracker, it does not hurt to do long exposure photography, and you can absolutely, stack your photographs when you're doing long exposures. But if you're going to go that route, one of the biggest tips that I can give you is obviously use manual focus whenever you are dialing in your settings, and you are going to want to really pay attention to your focus. You want to really pay more attention to focus than anything else. It's the most crucial thing of your night if you're doing Milky Way images. And I say this because there have been so many times when I have gone to take Milky Way shots and I just get so enamored with the setup of the rig and getting the dew heaters on and getting this right and getting the ISO right and getting that right, that I don't really take my time and truly study the focus point. And I have messed up 2 or 3 perfectly good Milky Way sessions by doing that. And I won't do it again. I've been very good about it the last couple of times that I've went, but only because I've made that my mistake myself so many times before. And I don't want you to make that. So pay special attention to your focus. Bring a Batinov mask if you want. You can absolutely use a Batinov mask on your camera lens. If you have a 3D printer, you can 3D print a Batinov mask. You can go to any number of websites and find them. I personally used Thingiverse recently to print a Batinov mask for my C8 SCT. Shout out to Chris. Thank you so much for that again. And they do have smaller ones as well. So I printed one for like my Rokinon 135 that came out great. And I printed a couple for lenses as well. If you can't find one that fits your lens, you can scale 3D prints. So like I own a Neptune 3 Pro and I use Ultimaker Cura is the software that I use. And there is a very easy to use scaling function in there. So if I wanted to, I could, get a bigger Batinov mask and then just literally shrink it down until it's the right size that you need. And that way you can just pop that on there, take a 10-second exposure that has a really bright star somewhere in it and zoom in and make sure that you're on point. And the other thing that you want to do if you're not using a star tracker is make sure that you know the 500 rule, or if you're using an APS-C sensor, the 300 rule. And I always say know it loosely because I tend to, reduce my time significantly from what the 500 rule says. But basically, you want to take 500 if you're using a full frame camera and 300 if you're using an APS-C sensor, and then just divide it by the focal length of whatever lens you're using. So, for example, if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter lens on a full frame camera, you would take 500 divided by 50 and you would get 10. So you have 10 seconds basically before the stars would start to trail. If you're using APS-C, it would be 300 divided by 50, which of course is 6, which means you get 6 seconds before the trails will start because of the Earth's rotation. Now, obviously, if you do something like a 16 millimeter lens, you're going to be able to let that clock run a lot longer before you have to take your next frame. So the longer the focal length goes, kind of the harsher you need to be with that 500 rule. Honestly, I would probably go like 4 seconds instead of 6 seconds with an APS-C sensor, just because you're really zooming into the core at that focal length with an APS-C sensor. And, you don't want star trails, because the closer your view gets, the more apparent it's going to be if you have any sort of blurring in your stars. Ask me how I know. And that's really where you want to bring a star tracker in. So, if it's me personally, I would stick with like a, 16, 24 millimeter, maybe 35 millimeters, but that's kind of pushing it. Personally 24 or lower for a nice wide frame lens. That's really kind of where the 500 rule shines, in my opinion. And you've got more than enough time. So, 31 seconds is what it is if you're using a 16 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. But just set your shutter to 25 seconds and that's going to be more than enough. If you can get like, 20, 30 shots at a really dark location, like a Bortle 2 or 3 or 4, you can really, really do a beautiful Milky Way stack with that kind of data. So, take from that what you will. That's just my personal advice, personal opinion. But I've taken quite a few Milky Way shots. And, one of the other things that I'll mention to you guys, because it got me quite a bit early on, is don't neglect your foreground. It's so easy when you're first getting started in Milky Way photography to just say, you know what, I managed to get my rig all set up out here in this weird location that I'm at, and I'm getting decent subs coming in. I'm not even going to mess with the foreground shot. Don't do that to yourself. Take a little bit of time. Show up before the sun goes down if you can. If you can do it during the blue hour when it's not quite dark enough yet for astrophotography to start, particularly if you're shooting the Milky Way, because you want truly dark scene for that. You can really get a beautiful shot of the landscape. And what you're going to want to do is stop down your lens a good bit so you can really get whatever, the focal point is of the photo that you're taking into focus. And then you can take a, longer frame as long as you're, obviously sitting on a tripod. And if it's dark out, don't be afraid to do a little bit of light painting. So, I will often like take my headlamp off, my red headlamp, take it off my head, and I'll point at some, neat looking foreground object, or maybe it's just a tree or a building if you're lucky. And then just, as that 10-second shutter is going off, I will literally trail that light across the entire frame. So, left to right, up and down, all the way across the frame. And since it's, a 10-second frame, it's absorbing all of that light slowly. So as long as, you keep moving and you don't pause on one spot too long, it should be a nice, even red light. And, you can adjust that in post if you want to. If you'd like to take the red out of it and make it, look like a more natural scene, you can certainly do that. You can have a lot of fun with things like lasers too. Sometimes I would like take me and my buddy and put us in the frame in the foreground, and then put a red headlamp behind us so we're kind of backlit as we're looking up at the Milky Way. And that can give you a really interesting focal point in the foreground if you don't otherwise have anything that interesting. Because, not every Milky Way location that you go to is going to have a gorgeous lake underneath it, and a mountain in the background, and eagles flying by. So if that's the case, just make your own interesting foreground. I've put my truck in the foreground before and lit it. I've actually used the entire campsite whenever I was out on the coast taking that dark sky trip a couple years ago, we actually got a really wide shot of the entire campsite in the frame. And it ended up looking really cool because it had all the telescopes. So we had 3 rigs running, had my truck, it had our chairs, it had the table. And then we did like a second version of the photo where we kind of took turns standing in different places. And then we combined all the frames and we had like 10 of us in different spots and ended up being really cool. So just a few ideas to throw out there. If you're hopefully doing 1 or 2 more Milky Way shots this year, maybe that'll give you a little something to work with. So yeah, definitely pay attention to that 500 or 300 rule and watch your focus. Pay attention to your foreground lighting as well. One other little tip that I will mention, just because I know that it is a setting in a lot of cameras. Some of them have long exposure noise reduction built in. Like I know my friend's Nikon had it. I think my Canon does have it, but it's not on by default. So make sure to check the settings in your camera and make sure that you don't have any long exposure noise reduction turned on, because it can really destroy stars in the frame. It can make them look like blurry little smudges instead of pinpoint lights, which is obviously what you want when you're doing something like a wide field Milky Way shot. So make sure to check your settings for that. Another thing to consider for Milky Way shots that I have messed up on before: do not forget your dew heaters. It's very easy to be like, oh, I'm just grabbing my camera, I don't need to worry about all the other astronomy gear. But a dew heater is very much something that you are going to want. I've had a couple of times where I had, great skies, but the humidity was awful. Seeing wasn't too bad, but the humidity was bad enough to where after I got set up, within about half an hour, my lens started fogging up every few minutes, and I was having to constantly go over there with a soft wipe and just wipe off my lens, which meant that I was messing up a frame, every couple of minutes when I was trying to take 30-second frames one after another. So definitely do not forget those dew heaters. Even if you're using something like a 16 millimeter lens, you can get it strapped around that tightly enough. If you got external battery packs, you can just bring one of those with you to power the dew heater. I always recommend to any astronomer or astrophotographer to quickly get yourself one of the really big Jackery style type battery packs. I actually got mine from the company Fantic early on, before they became the big electronics brand that they are now. I got it about 3 years ago and it's holding up great. It still holds a charge very well. It's got 2 AC outlets on it, like 4 USB ports, and it just does a phenomenal job. It runs 2 rigs with all the dew heaters, all night long with no problem. So definitely remember to get your dew heaters and remember a power source for them. You want to double check for SD cards. I've done that too. I've absolutely gotten somewhere, set everything up, and then saw no card and camera. And that is just so heartbreaking when it happens. So I recommend for that scenario in particular, it's not a bad idea to just buy a bunch of cheap SD cards. They don't have to be like the gold or silver grade V200 or whatever the heck they're called. Just get some basic ones. They don't have to be super speed, 16 gigabyte cards, enough that will let you get by in a pinch for one night of taking shots. And then I would, stick some in your car, stick a couple in your camera bag, stick a couple, wherever you put stuff that goes with you on photography trips. And at some point, you will forget a memory card and you will be extremely happy that you remember to do that. Bonus points if you stash an extra camera battery somewhere, because it really stinks when you get somewhere and realize that your battery is almost dead. I think I've got like 6 batteries for the R5 and R7. I'm very happy that Canon uses the same batteries for both of those cameras, the LP6Ns, I believe they're called. And those are great batteries. They pretty much last me the majority of the night whenever I go out and do astrophotography. But I always have 2 or 3 extra ones on me, if not more, just because I try to plan ahead for stuff like that as best I can. So I'd mentioned on the show a few weeks ago that I was trying to 3D print a focus knob for the C8. And I wanted to give a shout out to our listener, Alex. He actually did end up mailing me the proper ZWO one that is the focuser for the EAF, the bracket. So I'm going to be able to install that now, which I am just thrilled about. And the C8 is it's getting darn near ready for first light in my hands, at least. Obviously, Chris's father, well, I hope that he got to get first light with it. I didn't even ask about that. In any case, it will be first light for the Astrocast, and very, very much looking forward to that. So I got to install the off-axis guider the other night. I've never put one of those on, and anytime you get a new scope, particularly if it's not like something that you're accustomed to using, you inevitably have to order another adapter. It's kind of like when you're doing a home improvement job. Well, if you're me anyway, you end up inevitably making 3 or 4 trips to Home Depot before it's all said and done. I inevitably end up making 3 or 4 trips to Agena Astro before it's all said and done whenever I get a new telescope, because there's always like one little piece that you forgot. And I knew I was going to need some spacers because the C8 requires 105 millimeters of back focus, which is obviously longer than the 55 that we get with most of our refractors. So I went ahead and had ordered those, and I was super excited because I thought that was the last thing that I was going to need, because I'm just going with the off-axis guider and the spacers for now. I haven't looked to see if I can thread in a 2-inch filter or not. I'm going to have to get a filter drawer for the C8. Probably do that sooner than later. But I can at least get it up and running to where I can test everything out and make sure that it works before I drop any more money into it. Make sure that I can, get it working properly. So the last thing that I forgot that I was going to need, I'll be honest, I didn't forget that I was going to need this. I didn't even know that I was going to need this. But apparently, when you go from the C8 to the reducer, from the reducer to the off-axis guider is not a direct connection. So you actually have to go what's called SCT to M48. So SCT to, like a 2-inch SCT directly to M48. So Celestron actually sells a piece for, I think, $48 that you can screw onto the back of the C8. But I went on Amazon and I was able to find one for $8 that seems to have done the trick. I don't know if it's the same focal length or backspace distance rather as what the Celestron model is, but I think I was able to loosely calculate 105. So I think I'm pretty darn close. If you run into a situation where you need to get one of those for a C8 that is gifted to you, just FYI, you don't have to buy the Celestron version. Like for $50, you can go on Amazon and get one. Seems to be of decent quality. I'm sure Celestron's is more well-made. I have no doubt about it, but I'm trying to not spend as much money as possible because I wasn't really expecting to buy any more astronomy gear this year. But yeah, with that installed, I was able to screw the M48 side of the threads of the off-axis guider onto the C8, and then I put a few spacers on after that, and then threaded on the 294 MC Pro. So I got the guide camera in, I've got the main camera on. I think I'm ready to go for the most part. I just now need some darn clear skies so I can set up the telescope and have a look. So I plan on putting it on the CEM 26. I think with all the gear, I'll be around like 15, 16 pounds, which isn't too bad. I know it's a little heavier than the, general rule of thumb, which is use half the weight. But, I've been questioning that rule of thumb a lot lately. I kind of ask myself, like, why would manufacturers like ZWO advertise that you can put, 33 pounds of weight with a counterweight on their rig, like the AM3, like I've got, if you can't do that? You know what I mean? And like, don't get me wrong. I know it's not a bad idea to overburden your mount. Like anytime that you can keep the weight lower, it's going to be easier on the motors, and therefore you will get more life out of the mount. But I do question, like, early on when I first got into astrophotography, a lot of people would laugh at you if you even attempted to put more than half of the rated weight on some of these mounts. Now, that might have been like earlier on when it was like AVXs were all the rage and maybe they weren't very capable of handling too much weight, though I've heard people say that they've put, the full weight load on their AVX in the past. So what about you? Have you guys had any experience with that? If you have, please feel free to shoot me an email at ruastrocast@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear about it. I don't think the CEM 26 is going to have any trouble. It's just so well made, and I've had no issues out of it. I do know that it's starting to get up there in age a little bit, even though it runs like brand new. I think at some point I'll probably have to replace the belts on it. I think that's something I can do myself after watching a few videos. I don't think it'll be too much trouble, but maybe that'll be a good time to tune the old mount up and make sure that it's running just like brand new. And I guess time will tell. So it's very, very smooth on that right ascension axis, man. If you've ever used a CEM ioptron mount, then when you unlock that clutch, it is just buttery smooth, and that's great. But it's also a little troublesome sometimes because if you're not perfectly balanced on both sides, I mean, even if you are perfectly balanced on both sides, it can be super tricky to get that thing to be perfectly still on both the east and west side of the mount, all the way up and down. I usually just try to balance it as well as I can on the side that I'm actually going to be pointing the scope towards. And then I also have a clamp on weight that I put in that Z axis for that third axis balancing. So I've made a little video about that on my YouTube channel, and I've had a lot of people go on there and say thanks to me for putting that up because they had similar issues. Now, the good thing is, though, with harmonic mounts getting as popular as they are, those issues are going to be, a problem of the past for most newcomers. And at some point, there will be a group of astrophotographers who will say, back in my day, I had to balance my telescopes. And if you didn't have a third axis to balance on, you couldn't even image. Don't even think about it. But that day is not here quite yet. The other thing that I've been struggling with on the C8 is whether or not to buy a filter wheel. I haven't really had a need for one yet, just because I'm not doing mono, and it's pretty easy on my small refractor to just swap out that filter drawer whenever I'm not doing dual narrowband imaging and just put the L Pro in. But with the C8, I kind of feel like I should. I don't know why. It's just calling to me more, and I feel like in the long run, it'll probably be a lot better. I know that I could do, darks with a filter wheel. You can just basically get a black piece of something and put it in for one of the filter spots. They actually sell black plastic caps that they say are, dark filters. And you can pop those on and do your imaging. But I definitely think it would make life easier. And I want to, reduce the amount of tinkering that I have to do with that scope as much as possible. And if a filter wheel could do that for me, then that might end up being money well spent. Though it'll have to wait a little while because I'm all kind of tapped out, especially after. Let me tell you guys this one last funny story. So obviously, I'm traveling up for this dark sky trip in the coming weeks, and I've been trying to wrap my head around the best way possible to hook up the AM3 after I get there in terms of tripods, right? So I'm flying, and I started like looking up different options because I do own several tripods, but I don't own the AM3/AM5 tripod. I own my Ioptron one, a Light Rock one. And then I own a three-legged thing, Leo, which is just great for my R5, but really that's more of a lightweight tripod. I definitely wouldn't want to set up a full rig on it, though I have done star trackers quite successfully. But nothing that is really a perfect fit for travel. So I went and looked at the AM3 tripod for $350, which is not cheap at all. And I think to myself, like, there's just no way, because I already own all these tripods. I'm not going to get another one, especially when I'm setting up a pier in the backyard. And I'm like, there's got to be another way. So I start like looking around for different kinds of tripods. I start looking at like low profile tripods, the little tiny ones that are only 16 inches off the ground. I'm considering those. So I'm just going to be at a dark sky site. It can sit on the ground for all I care, as long as it can image. I started looking at YouTube videos of people who had built their own tripods out of wood that can break down and fold into small pieces. And, long story short, after doing research for 3 days and trying to find a better option or a more economical option, I can tell you there is not one. There's not a better option, and there's not a more economical option. ZWO really did do the best in terms of giving you a affordable, and that's relatively speaking, tripod for the AM3 or the AM5. So I ended up getting it. It's extremely nice. Like, I had seen some mixed reviews on this in particular, and I know everyone suggests that you get the pier for it, and I probably will, but I don't think I'm going to need it for this particular trip. And the beauty is it folds down to like 19 inches whenever it's fully retracted, and it barely weighs 5 pounds. So it's going to be perfect for the travel that I'm doing. And I'm super excited to have it, because it is going to make life a whole lot easier for me ultimately while I'm out there under those dark skies. And I'd even considered asking, a couple of the friends to maybe bring an extra tripod for me, but I just didn't want to be that guy. I'm already going to have to ask for power when I get there, which is something that I never have to do whenever I travel to the observatory, because I can just bring my battery or plug in to the power that we have down there. But when you're flying, you can't bring a giant Jackery size battery. So you're kind of, you gotta make do with what you have. So luckily for me, I've got some great friends, and they're going to take care of the power situation. But the tripod, I just couldn't find a better one. So I will say it's super nice how it works. So it comes with this plate that has three, I think they're M6 screws, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but you unscrew the three screws from the bottom of the AM3 itself, and then the plate goes onto the AM3, and you replace the screws, and then it's just a matter of unfolding the tripod legs and setting the mount directly on the head, and it just falls right into place. And then there's a locking knob that you twist. It's literally just one twist and it's locked down. So if you've already got it set up properly, you don't have to like twist the base or anything like that. You really don't have to do anything. You just set the mount on there and then turn that knob, and that is it. So super duper easy to do. And you can carry the whole thing with one hand. So like I have the AM5 on the, I think it's called the TC40 tripod. It might be TC20. Is it TC20 or TC40? Let me see. It is TC40, but I wasn't mistaken about TC20. They also make a TC20 version of this tripod that is for the C Star. So it's it appears to look very, very similar to the TC40, but it just has I guess just a 3/8 knob sticking out. Part of me wondered if that TC20 would work for the AM3, but I couldn't really find a whole lot of information out there. And the reason I was considering it is because the TC20 is only $79 as opposed to $350. But I mean, I would imagine, I sure hope that there's a reason for that. I know the maximum height's only 14 inches on the TC20, so it's definitely a much lower profile tripod compared to the 40. But man, oh man, $79 versus $350. That is a huge difference. But 66 pounds for the 20 versus 110 pounds for the 40. Not that I would ever put 110 pounds on it, but it also extends, more than twice as much, up to, I think, 32 inches, if I'm not mistaken. So you definitely get I think a lot more tripod for your money ultimately. But I don't know, $79. Boy, oh boy, if I find out that works with the AM3, I will have to shed a fiscal tear. Yeah, as I set that AM3 on the tripod and just kind of sat back and marveled at it. It's such a gorgeous setup. I'm so happy to finally have one of those after a couple of years of looking at them nonstop and uh, being jealous of everyone else when I go to the observatory. But we finally made it happen, and I'm definitely going to enjoy that. And without a doubt, it'll be a great travel rig to have. Makes me a lot more excited about when I do dark sky trips, because my GTI is still going to get plenty of love. I absolutely love that mount. And I definitely plan on bringing it with me, but I won't have to struggle with the CEM26 anymore while traveling. Not that it's a super heavy mount, because it's definitely not. It's a great mount and I love it, but I would rather it live in an observatory than be moved around constantly. And whenever I do go on dark sky trips, I always like to bring at least 2 rigs and then a camera on a tripod, with the move, shoot, move in this case. So that will give me the ability to do this. So I guess I'm thinking about it now. I've got move, shoot, move. I've got the Sky Guider Pro. I've got the GTI CEM26 and the AM3. So wow, that's 5 separate rigs that I could run, and I don't have 5 cameras. Let me think. I've got the R5, the R7, the 294 MC Pro, and the 585 MC Pro. Actually, I do have my old Canon T3i that's astro modded. I still have that camera sitting around. So if I was ever so inclined, I could technically set up 5 different tracking rigs at the same time. How crazy would that be? Maybe that'll be a video that I make sometime, setting up 5 rigs, all with wildly different equipment on them, and seeing which one can take the best shot. I don't know if it would be a very fair fight, just because obviously with the move, shoot, move and the Sky Guider Pro, you're just going to be doing, wide field shots of the Milky Way and what have you, but they all serve their purpose. And, the moment one of them starts collecting dust and not really being of too much use anymore, obviously I will probably end up selling it, because it's such a great community. And I like to make sure that, I can rehome stuff if it's not being used. So I can't think of too many other things to mention right now, just because, again, it's been a month of nothing but clouds, guys. I sure do miss those stars. I hope they start paying us a visit really soon. If you're like me and you're in an area that has just really been bad this summer and last summer, just remember, fall and then winter is going to be here before you know it. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, clear skies will show up eventually. I know it's really hard for a lot of us. I've talked to, several of the members on the Discord who get visually upset that they haven't been able to get outside. And I get that. I really do. I sympathize with you, but that's part of life. And that's really part of what makes this hobby so incredible, is because you have to make the time for it when it's available. And when that night finally does come along, that's absolutely perfect. And you get to be out there under the stars and it's comfortable. There's not mosquitoes eating you alive, and your gear is running perfectly, and you're watching the Milky Way and maybe a Perseid meteor shoots by. It doesn't get any better than that. And that's really why we do what we do. So just be patient. The clear skies will return. There might be satellites in them, there's no stopping that, but inevitably the clear skies will return. So just be patient, and they'll be back before you know it. Recommendations this week. I've got a fitting one for you. All of you guys probably know I'm a big Stephen King fan. I'm also a big fan of Seth Rogen and his friends. If you've read his book in the past, it's not the recommendation, but it's a very good book. Highly recommend it. He tells a lot of stories about the friends that he grew up with, and you'll recognize all of them from the movies that he has been in. But one of those friends is James Franco. And Stephen King and James Franco, they must be friends too, because they've worked on, quite a few different projects together over the years, including the awesome Stephen King book 11/22/63. James Franco actually played the main character in that book, who goes back in time and tries to save Kennedy. But in this case, I'm referring to a novel that King wrote. It's called The Dead Zone, and it came out years ago. It's one of his older novels, but definitely one of his best. I've been really, really hooked on this book. I won't spoil it for you, but it seems to me that it's just as relevant today as ever. And James Franco does a phenomenal job narrating the book. So I really can't recommend it enough. It's not as much horror as it is kind of a slow burn thriller, I suppose you could say. Haven't seen too many horrifying things in it, though. There are definitely some really skeezy, creepy things that'll make your skin crawl. So definitely a good bit of that. But King is no slouch to putting in things that make your skin crawl. He is certainly known to do it. So that is The Dead Zone by Stephen King, read by James Franco. So you can get that on Audible or wherever you happen to listen. So just another reminder, if you enjoy the show and you would like to support us, you can join by going to patreon.com/the Astrocast, and you can join us in the members only Discord that gets busier and busier every single day. I swear we got 4 new members in the last 2 weeks, 3 this week alone. And everybody is coming straight in to the Discord, and we're all definitely enjoying each other's company. So we would love to have you there. You can join for as little as $1 a month. Just give whatever you can, and we will see you there. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Astrocast. I greatly appreciate you tuning in as always. I am going to catch you guys next week. I was looking at the weather, and supposedly there's a chance for clear skies on Sunday night. All I can say is I will believe it when I see it. So thank you so much for listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue, and as always, clear skies.